Hello everybody, yes, it's of course me, GhostCritic. It's Friday, it's time for some comic book reviews. Had a bevy of beauties in my stack, but kind of lean towards the very dark side of comics. It isn't fun being a parent or a child in comic books these days, as you will find out as I go through my titles that I picked up this week. You know what books I picked up if you watch my Wednesday's video. So let's kick right off with something that came out last week, I believe. I had a choice between two books and I didn't pick this one, but my comic book store kind of twisted my arm to buy this, and it's a book that I didn't think he would particularly like, but apparently he thought it was very good. And I agreed. It's Birthright issue 1. Now, the other book, because I couldn't afford last week to get too many books, I had to make a choice between this and Scott Snyder's Witches, and I had to get Witches, and I don't regret making that decision last week at all. However, I'm glad I've decided to pick up Birthright 2 because it is a really good book. Now, I think the cover doesn't do it justice, what goes on inside. My feeling when I looked at the cover was that this was maybe aimed at a younger audience. The way it's all presented, it's a very good cover. It's well drawn by Preston and Lucas. There's nothing wrong with, you know, the actual image itself and how it's rendered, because that's the word we're using now. But it just felt a little childish, so that's kind of why I went, no, maybe not. However, the inside is far from childish. We have a child going missing, poor little Mikey. And he's out with his father playing ball. He goes in the woods and then just disappears. And for the next year we have, you know, searches for the child, investigations. It gets some media attention. Of course, you then get that backlash and this breakdown of the family unit, where the mother wanting to divorce the father turning into a drunk, the older brother kind of stuck in the middle. It all feels very kind of familiar in a kind of creepy McCann kind of way. But then it all takes a fantastical turn and kind of eases up a little bit with the more in real life, you know, art mirroring life kind of deal. Yes, 1 year later the child returns. However, Mikey has grown up somewhat into a strapping young man, decked out like a reject from Lord of the Rings, as his older brother coins him. And we find out from this man, who, you know, we are presuming is Mikey, that he was taken to this kind of fantastical world where, yes, he is the chosen one. He is the one that is going to take down this evil god called Law, if I remember rightly, which, through the storytelling of Mikey as a grown-up, we find out that he did indeed slay this evil godlike creature called Law. However, the last page of this would probably make us think otherwise. Not to spoil it, I know it's already been out a week, but I still won't spoil this if you're thinking or have been on the fence of picking this up. Please do. I'm glad I did. It's a good fun book, and I'm looking forward to the next issue to see how kind of this grown-up Mikey kind of integrates into his family, and how the last page is going to play into it all. Very good. Issue 9 of The Twilight Zone. It's the first part of the new story arc from J. Michael Straczynski, and I think Straczynski's been playing around a lot with the sense of time in this series from Dynamite. The first story arc was firmly within the present. The second story arc with our waitress who could look into the future, see what was going to happen. And now with this story arc we have our detective who we've seen glimpses of in the past two stories, and we are certainly looking back to the past in this one. A little bit perhaps of time travel going on in this issue. Our detective has been hired by the head of the business that we saw in the first story arc to investigate the death of his son, the kind of random murder that took place. He has he's asked many other investigation teams, you know, kind of like private investigators and detectives and such like, and they've come to him with nothing. They can't find out who his son's killer is. So he's enlisted this very down on his luck private detective to hopefully do what no one else has been able to do for the last, I don't know what kind of time frame this is, but it has been a long time since his son died, and kind of all the leads have gone cold, etc. The thing with the Twilight, with this book, is that it doesn't always feel like the show, the TV show, and I think it relies too much on the kind of the twist to push forward the story. In the Twilight Zone, the TV show, it was very much the twist came right at the very end, and it was like the reveal was there and you were left with it. Here it seems to be that our kind of the twist, the reveal, the quirky part of it is thrown right at you almost at the very beginning, and the story then goes on from there. So you've kind of got a backward mirror image of the TV show. It's still interesting, the idea of our detective who this is his kind of last chance to make good of a job and do something with himself, trying to find this random killer. And he learned so much about this, the head of the company's son, and how great this guy was, how much he did with his life, and how much he affected everyone else. You know, he's been to Afghanistan, he's been in the war, you know, and then he realised, you know, the government might not be doing such a great job, and turning to these kind of peaceful, what you call them, kind of meetings, gatherings together. And our detective wants to be like him, so we get the kind of polar opposites where our detective tries to put himself in this kind of soldier son's shoes, so to speak, even as far as to go into a kind of Army and Navy store and get the uniform and put that on to try and make him feel like this murdered guy. But it's a good start to the next storyline. I am intrigued to find out how Straczynski is going to bring all these stories together as he has promised in the last story arc. But good stuff from Dynamite as usual. So Justice League Dark issue 35, and I have to say my main gripe about this is timing. My God, this would have been so easy to sort out. Issue 35 is kind of the beginning of the end of the story that's going to come out in the annual, which doesn't come out till next week. It makes this kind of jumping onto this story incredibly distressing and confusing, and why they couldn't have just swapped the weeks round. Why could we not have had the annual come out this week and the actual issue 35 come out next week? It would have made the story probably flow a lot more, be more understandable. But what we kind of know from the first page, and at least DeMatteis helps us out just a little bit, in that our team, our new kind of Justice League Dark team, have been sucked into this wormhole, this hole in space. They've been kind of separated, and this particular story focuses on Zatanna, and she meets up with her father, but a very much younger version of her father. And if you're reading this and you haven't read it yet, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I will say by the time you get to the end of this book, you wonder what the whole point of it was. There only seemed to be one point, and that was to show Zatanna's relationship with her father. And I don't think it needed a whole issue to tell that relationship. Even I think we've even had hints about it in previous issues. We certainly know about it for any of us that have read pre-52. We know that the close relationship Zatanna has with her father. So I was a little bit disappointed with this issue as a whole. The cover made it look way more exciting than it actually was. If you saw my video on Wednesday, I wondered who one of the guys was excuse me, on the cover. I thought it was John Constantine, but it's actually Adam Bennett. Adam Bennett is coming back to Justice League Dark, him of I, Vampire, the sadly missed first salvo from the New 52 when it first started, that was cruelly cancelled. But I was right with all the rest, apart from maybe I think that's Madame Xanadu, but we don't see her at all in this issue. We see Swamp Thing, Black Orchid, Nightmare Nurse, and I think it's John Constantine right in the last couple of last pages, but we don't really learn anything about what's been going on with them. So Justice League Dark, it probably would have been a much more meaningful storyline. It might have made a bit more sense if we'd only had that annual first. Batman Eternal issue 29, and we're back to Arkham. Yes, we've been sporadically dropping in on Batwing and Corrigan as they search through the catacombs, the basements of Arkham, to find out what's going on. And yes, we're back here again. Batwing fending off winged demons left, right and centre. His kind of use in this story, I guess, in this issue, is basically just to get Batman up to date on what is going on in Arkham, and I guess in a way to maybe push the story a tiny little bit further, bringing in the Riddler, Edward Nygma. There's lots of code breaking that tells Batman and everyone else that, you know, we're not seeing the bigger picture. Arkham is only a tiny piece. Who else is in here? We've got the Joker's daughter. She's starting to come to the conclusion and the realisation that who she thought she was working for actually isn't who she thought she was going to be working for, i.e. I guess Daddy Dearest Joker. And so she's kind of taken the crowbar into her own hands, so to speak, and is making some violent headway to who we think, or who may be at the heart of all this Arkham craziness. We do pop in for a second and check up on Alfred, who's still in his kind of fear toxined delirium, and to be honest, he seems to be afraid of Cookie Monster. That thing is blue, it's furry, it's the Cookie Monster. That's all I'm going to say there. And finally, oh my god, are we ever going to see the Spectre? They tease and they tease with it. This is the only thing that's kind of making this kind of Arkham story for me worth reading, is that I'm just waiting for that moment where we finally get to see the Spectre. And you wonder, especially reading here, how long is it going to take for him to appear? Maybe by the last page he may have, but we still don't know for sure. Corrigan is being kind of held captive by Deacon Blackfire in this kind of magical, mystical barrier ray thing for whatever purpose he needs to bring about something, some probably evil, demonic creature to appear from more depths of Arkham. Who knows? But God's sake, I just one panel, just to tide me over, please. Okay, Grant Morrison's The Multiversity. This time we're dealing with the Just, and it just didn't work for me. I'm sorry. No, it's just got far too self-referential in this whole deal about comic books coming from different dimensions, and the people in those dimensions are actually real, but the people in other dimensions that are reading the comic book just think it's kind of fake and it's just a story. It's not real. It's like beating me over the head with a hammer. I just don't like it. It's not subtle, and I just don't see how it's going to work in the kind of grand scheme of things. It just seems such a poor plot point, and more, I mean, especially with this issue, as the kind of cover we've got here suggests, this is kind of Morrison taking a kind of superhero angle stab at kind of like the vapidity of celebrity culture that we're in right now. And although it kind of works on a certain level, it's all a little bit too obvious and trite, and I'm sure Morrison is better than this. It just didn't work for me. I didn't like it. The artwork is kind of it's almost photorealistic in a way. The artwork's very good, but it's that style which I'm not entirely keen on. We're talking about a world where Batman is actually Damian Wayne and Superman is Connor Kent. But the fact is, you know, you have all these superheroes, and there is a kind of sense of legacy in there. These are the children of the original superheroes, but the superheroes did such a great job that there is no crime, no evil, big bad alien invasion for them to do, and so they have kind of in turn turned towards this kind of celebrity lifestyle. Connor, I think it was, is now an artist, and he has installations and does exhibitions, and they all have big parties that are just pointless and vapid. I didn't like it. Unwritten the Apocalypse, issue 10, only 2 more issues to go, and here both of our parties think they have the weapon to destroy the other, but neither of them work. And it would appear that our main character, Tom, is going to have to go back to the place that he's been kind of trying to distance himself so far from, and we're talking from the very beginning of the Unwritten, right at the beginning, and we are talking about the Tommy Taylor books. We've seen, for anyone who's been reading the Unwritten or has just started to read this, you know that kind of Tom can go into these different story genres, a particular book, and live inside it. And it does appear that, you know, we might have a showdown between Tom and Pullman within the pages of the Tommy Taylor series. I love this. It's so well written. It's been so well plotted. Very clever. The artwork by Peter Gross, typically Vertigo. He hasn't really changed his style a great deal in a many number of years, but that's not to say it's not great artwork and does the book justice, because it does. It's been a highlight of the kind of Vertigo house for a while. I have read, or kind of read headlines anyway, that they're looking to rebrand Vertigo for 2015. I'm not surprised, what with not only the Unwritten, but we've got Fables finishing very soon, two of their kind of big hitters. There isn't a great deal of big books coming out of Vertigo anymore. Okay, you've got Astro City and Hinterkind. I'm trying to think of any more Vertigo titles that are out at the moment. They are very thin on the ground, but maybe when we get this rebranding, we might see some new talent, some new ideas, some more adult orientated comic book fare for us to read. Stray Bullets issue 8. This is the final issue of this Killers run. There is a new run starting in, I think it could be the end of December, maybe January, but he's bringing out another new mini-series. But this kind of wraps up our kind of Ellie and Virginia storyline, and Lapham certainly does not hold back on the tragedy and depression for this final issue. Basically, Ellie and Virginia have split up after the events of last issue, where there was torture, there was bloodshed, there was faces being blown off. It was all very bloody and violent, as is with Stray Bullets. But unfortunately, Ellie still can't seem to keep himself out of trouble, even without Virginia by his side. His cousin is such a bastard. His cousin gets Ellie to take his girlfriend, who he's made pregnant, to go and force her to have an abortion. The girl doesn't want an abortion, and Eddie manages to escape from the clinic without his cousin knowing, and takes her back to basically the scene of the crime, the torture scene, the violence, the shooting of last issue, the beach house of kind of one of the, I guess he's a sort of mob boss. Unbeknownst to him, the rival mob gang have been staking out the beach house, and they think that Ellie and this girlfriend of his cousin's are people entirely different, and get ready to go inside to do some more bloodshed, killing and violence. Virginia is there as well, trying to help out. There's blood everywhere, people die. Who dies by the end of this? What shocking revelations and depression will happen by the end of the issue? You need to pick it up and read it to find out. I'm not going to spoil the ending for this, but let's just put it this way. No one comes off good. No one. This has been a great kind of really visceral series. It's not one that's ever going to have a happy ending, whatever volume, whatever story you're reading, and that is kind of, I want to say, the joy of Stray Bullets, is that I know I'm not going to get a happy ending, but you never really see how bad it's going to turn out. And that's what's great, and how much I love Stray Bullets. Okay, this is the penultimate issue. It's Goners, another new issue 1 from Image. And this is basically perfect fare for Halloween time coming up, because it's a supernatural, spooky horror book. We have this family, mum and dad, brother and sister. Mum and dad are supernatural horror monster hunters, I guess. And we see them in action, fighting against some demonic entities, but they die. This is right at the very beginning of the book. I'm not spoiling anything here. It is unfortunately televised in front of hundreds of thousands of people. Unfortunately, two of those people are, of course, son and daughter. Their house clearly has mystical barriers on them to protect the kids, which once their parents die breaks down, letting in a dozen more demons hell-bent on the murder of the kids too. This book was a lot of fun, helped by the kind of very cartoony art style. If you think Humberto Ramos, you probably got a good idea of the kind of styling of this book. But it makes it not so much dark, even though there's obviously a lot of dark kind of horror matter in there, but it gives it a lightness, a cartoony style to it too. So it's full of, excuse me, kind of detective work. There's demons, and of course there's lots of death in it. And I don't know what it is about this book. I just really kind of enjoyed the style of it, the flow of the storyline. You know, it threw you right into the deep end straight away. We are going to finish off this week in style, of course. This had to be my pick of the week. 5 Ghosts, issue 13, it's back. And what a welcome return it is. Barbarian Moneyham bringing us a horror tale. Fabian is in Romania hunting down his best friend Sebastian, who at the end of the last story arc was kidnapped. So we kind of get this, I guess they're almost kind of vampires, I guess. There is definitely that kind of vampiric feel to these monsters. As he's making his way, you know, through his latest adventure, he saves a young boy from these monsters, but gets mixed up in this whole kind of plague. There's a disease in a small town. People are dying, being turned into these monsters. It's all great, kind of has this Hammer horror film type feel to it. Coupled with those kind of EC, eerie and creepy comics that you had back in like the 60s and the early 70s. Coupled with Moneyham's artwork on this, always a great feel to the book that Moneyham gives. There's something about this book that just makes every issue really, really great read for me. I thoroughly recommend this book. If you've not read 5 Ghosts before, this is fine to jump on. You don't need to know a great deal about this, what's come before, but I do recommend you go and pick up the last 2 volumes in trade perhaps, or if you can hunt down the singles, do that. The only part that you may need a little bit of back history on is that while all this is going on the outside, Fabian seems to be struggling with his inner demons, or should I say ghosts, and that's kind of a fallout from the end of the last story arc, where the vampire ghost that is inside Fabian, it kind of took dominance and seems to be wanting to do that now, and Fabian is struggling for control of him. That seems that it might come into play in this storyline somewhere down the way. Hope it does. 5 Ghosts. It's amazing. And that's it. We're done. We've got comics. We've read them. We've enjoyed them. We've disliked them. We've kind of read them again just to make sure we didn't miss anything. And we're all waiting for next Wednesdays now. Thank you all for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed and you enjoyed yourself. Otherwise, don't. Give yourself a big thumbs up and let me know in the comments section about the books that you read this week. Did you read any of the ones that I read? What did you think of them? Was they just as bad as I thought it was, or did people get more out of it than I clearly didn't? Until next week, I'll see ya. Bye bye.